New details have surfaced about Bryant Dragon Arnold's sudden disappearance from the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and what insiders claim forced him to walk away is far more unsettling than what the show ever revealed. For 3 seasons, Dragon stood as the ranch's gatekeeper, protector, and enforcer. But behind the scenes, something was happening to him that got progressively worse. Tonight, we uncover the disturbing truth about why he really left. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. From the very beginning of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Bryant Dragon Arnold wasn't just a security chief. He was the wall between the crew and whatever lived beneath that cursed mesa. When viewers first met him, he looked like a man who had already seen too much. The folded arms, the cold stare, the clipped answers. Dragon didn't talk like normal guards. He talked like someone who believed the ranch itself was aware, watching, waiting for mistakes. What most people don't realize is that Dragon wasn't hired for TV. He had been on the ranch long before cameras ever showed up. Brandon Fugel trusted him more than anyone else on the property. His job wasn't just to protect the team from trespassers. His job was to protect the outside world from what might slip out. Even in the early episodes, his behavior hinted at someone carrying a secret. While Travis Taylor and the scientists chased anomalies, Dragon stayed back, scanning the tree line like he expected something to step out. He memorized every blind spot, every shadow, every place where the air felt wrong. He rarely smiled, he rarely blinked, and he never let his guard down, even for a second. The crew joked about his seriousness, but insiders claimed it wasn't an act. Dragon had witnessed events that weren't televised, incidents the production company refused to show because they didn't know how to explain them. A nighttime distortion that moved like a solid mass, a figure pacing near Homestead, 2 when no one else was on that side of the property. A sound recorded near the winter shed that technicians described as metal bending underwater. Dragon never told the full stories, but everyone who worked around him knew this. Something had changed him before filming ever began. He treated the ranch not as a location, but as a threat. And over time, that mindset, combined with the things he saw behind closed doors, would become the reason he walked away from the show entirely. Because deep down, Dragon believed the ranch wasn't just dangerous. He believed it was escalating. Dragon never talked much about fear. In fact, most people assumed he didn't feel it. But the moment that began pulling him away from the show, the moment that started the unraveling, happened late one night near the south fence line. It wasn't filmed, it wasn't logged, and it wasn't part of any episode. It was something the crew whispered about in private, lowering their voices like they were afraid the ranch might overhear. That night, Dragon was walking the perimeter with 2 crew members after strange radio interference spiked across every channel. They expected to find trespassers or maybe an equipment malfunction. Instead, the temperature dropped hard and fast, like the air had been sucked out of the valley. The men's breath hung thick in the darkness. Even the insects stopped making sound. That's when Dragon noticed it, an outline standing in front of the ridge, tall, motionless, backlit by nothing but moonlight. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then it moved, not like a human, not like an animal. It shifted sideways, as if gliding across the ground without stepping. One of the camera operators muttered, "What the hell is that?" But Dragon didn't answer. His hand hovered over his sidearm, not drawing, just bracing. The figure paused in front of the mesa slope, then vanished. Not walked away, not ran. It blinked out. The men stood frozen, but Dragon stepped forward slowly, as if pulled by a force he couldn't explain. He scanned the ridge, ordered the others back, and radioed base. But the radio shrieked, not static, not distortion, an inhuman metallic warping noise that made both men cover their ears. After the interference cleared, Dragon spoke only 2 words: "Shut it." The next morning, he acted like nothing happened, but everyone noticed the change. He stared at the mesa longer. He patrolled in silence. He stopped joking with the camera crew. Something was weighing on him. Something he didn't want on tape. Something he didn't want analyzed, replayed, or discussed. And whatever he saw that night near the ridge, it shook the unshakable. It was the first sign that Dragon wasn't just protecting the ranch. He was trying to protect himself from whatever had finally noticed him back. In the weeks after the ridge encounter, Dragon kept insisting everything was fine. Just operational stress, just long hours, just the job. But the crew knew better. They'd worked with him long enough to understand that Dragon only shut down when something truly rattled him. And soon, a second event pushed him further from the show than anyone realized. It happened inside the command trailer, what Dragon used to call his safe place. Nothing strange happened in that trailer. No cold spots, no equipment failures, no unexplained shadows. It was the one building everyone trusted. But one night, shortly after midnight, as Dragon was reviewing drone footage alone, every monitor in front of him froze at the exact same frame. A frame that shouldn't have existed. On every screen, from every angle, the footage showed the same image. A silhouette standing behind Dragon inside the trailer, only a few feet from where he sat. It wasn't tall. It wasn't monstrous. It looked wrong in a completely different way. It looked human, but the proportions were distorted. Too long, too narrow. The angles bent like something was wearing the shape of a human but didn't know how to fit inside it. Dragon spun around instantly, hand on his weapon, but nothing was there. The air behind him was ice cold, almost wet, like he had opened a freezer door. The monitors flickered again. The silhouette was gone. Then, one by one, each screen replayed the last 2 seconds of the footage backward, without any input from him. Dragon hit keys, slammed the power button, yanked the cables, but it didn't matter. The screens stayed on, playing the same impossibly reversed footage of something standing right where he had been sitting. The distortion formed a kind of shape around the figure, like static was outlining it. But the face was the worst part. It was blurred, smeared like wet paint, except 2 dark hollows stared out from the center of it, watching him, evaluating him. By the time the system finally powered down, Dragon was shaken in a way no one had ever seen. When the tech crew checked the equipment the next morning, they found no corrupted files, no glitch logs, no abnormal activity. There was no trace of the silhouette, no evidence the monitors had ever malfunctioned, no proof anything had happened at all. But Dragon knew what he saw, and from that night forward, he refused to stay in the trailer alone. He kept the lights on longer, slept less, and checked the door locks twice as often. Because whatever had appeared behind him wasn't just watching the ranch, it was watching him, and it wanted him to know it. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine nighttime perimeter sweep. Dragon had done hundreds of them, walking the fence line, checking sensors, logging wildlife activity. But this time, the air felt wrong. The moment he stepped outside, even the other security guys later admitted they could feel it too. A heaviness, like the entire ranch was holding its breath. Halfway through the sweep, Dragon radioed in with something strange. His voice wasn't panic, not yet, but it carried an edge the team wasn't used to hearing. "Do you copy? I'm getting movement near Sector C, but it's not tripping the ground sensors." The team checked the system. Dragon was right. No alerts, no thermal spikes, nothing. But he kept whispering that something was pacing him through the trees, staying just out of sight. He said he could hear it. Slow steps, crunching dirt, the soft push of branches. But the thermal drone showed only Dragon. Then, suddenly, he stopped answering the radio. The command trailer erupted with noise, everyone shouting, scrambling to reach him. By the time they arrived at the far corner of the property, they found Dragon standing perfectly still, staring at the old cottonwood tree near the ravine. His flashlight hung loosely in his hand, beam pointed at the ground. His pupils were dilated, his breath shallow, like he had just seen something that didn't belong in this world. One of the crew called his name. Dragon didn't react. It wasn't until Thomas physically grabbed his shoulder that he snapped out of it, gasping like someone had held him underwater. When they asked what happened, he didn't answer. He just kept shaking his head, whispering, "You didn't see it. You didn't see what was there." They searched the area. No footprints, no thermal traces, no broken branches. Nothing that explained the terror still trembling through him. But when they reviewed Dragon's body cam, something even more unsettling emerged. At the exact moment Dragon stopped responding, the microphone picked up a faint clicking noise. Soft, rhythmic, unnatural. Not an animal, not machinery. Something else. Something responding to him. Then a low, distorted whisper layered under the clicking. "Come back." The audio text acoustics tried to isolate the sound, filter it, enhance it, but the deeper they analyzed it, the stranger it became. The waveform wasn't consistent with any known voice pattern, it wasn't human, and it wasn't mechanical. It was something in between. When they showed Dragon the clip, he refused to listen to it. He walked out of the trailer without saying a word. And later that night, he told the cameras something he'd never admitted before. "I'm not scared of this place because of what it can do. I'm scared because sometimes it feels like it already knows us, knows me." That night, Dragon didn't finish his sweep. For the first time in the show's history, he refused to go back out into the dark. Something had been waiting for him out there, and whatever it was, it wanted him alone. After the incident at the cottonwood tree, Dragon tried to return to work as if nothing had happened, but the crew noticed something immediately. He was different, more guarded, more restless, and for the first time since he joined the team, Dragon started keeping things off record. It began when he insisted on reviewing all overnight surveillance footage alone, hours before the rest of the team arrived. At first, nobody questioned it. They assumed he was trying to make sense of what he'd experienced, but then the system logs revealed something odd. Several files had been accessed, viewed, and then manually copied into an encrypted folder under Dragon's personal login. Footage that was no longer accessible to anyone else. When asked about it, Dragon brushed it off as routine security archiving, but the explanation didn't sit right. He never did that before, and he certainly never locked the team out of data. Then came the night Brandon Fugel himself flew in, responding to a message Dragon sent privately. The cameras caught their silhouettes inside the command trailer, voices muted, door locked. No one ever learned what Dragon showed him. But when Brandon walked out, he looked rattled, shaken in a way the ranch had never visibly affected him before. The only clue came from the drone operator, who swore he saw Dragon carrying a small metal case out to his truck later that evening, something he had pulled from the restricted storage room where only the highest-level evidence was kept. Whatever was inside it, Dragon placed it gently on the passenger seat and drove off without a word. The next morning, he returned to the ranch, pale, exhausted, and refusing to talk about where he had gone. But the change was unmistakable. Dragon had always been strict, intense, sometimes paranoid, but now he was something else entirely. He was afraid, not of intruders, not of trespassers, but of the thing he had locked in that case. Something the ranch had shown him, something he didn't want the others to see, something he feared would change everything if it ever became public. And from that day forward, Dragon stopped trusting the ranch's systems. He stopped trusting the investigation, and worst of all, he stopped trusting the crew. Dragon tried to hide it, but the fear was starting to bleed through his hardened exterior. He stopped walking the property alone. He double-checked every camera angle, every infrared sweep, every motion sensor. He even began carrying 2 radios, something no one had ever seen him do. And still, none of it prepared him for what happened during the final incident that pushed him toward the edge. It began just after sunset. The team was in the command center reviewing the anomalies from the previous night when Dragon abruptly stiffened, staring at the monitor showing the northern fence line. A single motion sensor had triggered, just one, but the cameras picked up nothing. No animals, no vehicles, no movement, just empty darkness. Dragon muttered, "That's not nothing," and grabbed his gear. At first, the others assumed he was going alone again, but he didn't. He stormed out of the trailer, breathing hard, scanning the horizon like something was calling him. When Travis tried to follow, Dragon held up a hand, an unspoken warning. The crew watched him approach the fence line, his flashlight slicing through the growing fog. Everything looked normal, too normal. No footprints, no tracks, no thermal signatures. Then the radios crackled, first with static, then with Dragon's voice, but warped like it was coming through water. "It's here again." The entire command room fell silent. "I can't see it, but it's close. Close enough to..." His voice cut out, replaced by a low distortion that sounded disturbingly like breathing. Travis tried to call him back. No answer. The team sprinted toward his location, their headlights tearing through the night. But before they reached him, the sensors around Dragon began firing firing in sequence, north, then east, then west, like something was circling him at impossible speed. When they finally reached the fence line, they found Dragon standing rigid, facing the tree line. His flashlight lay at his feet, the beam angled upward like it had been dropped mid-motion. His eyes were wide, not terrified, but furious, like he was staring down something that pushed him past fear and straight into anger. "What did you see?" Thomas asked, panting. Dragon didn't turn, didn't blink. He whispered only one sentence. "It wasn't outside the fence. It was behind me." The team spun around, scanning the empty field. Nothing was there. Not a figure, not a shape, not even a thermal reading. But Dragon wouldn't move, wouldn't even lower his voice. "That thing was close enough to touch me." When they finally escorted him back to the trailer, Dragon locked the door behind him and refused to talk for nearly an hour. When he emerged, he said something that left the entire team stunned. "This ranch isn't reacting to us anymore. It's choosing who it shows itself to." And from the way he said it, they knew who it had chosen last. Dragon. After the incident at the fence line, Dragon tried to act normal, walking the perimeter, checking the logs, pretending everything was fine. But the team saw the cracks forming. He stopped cracking jokes. He didn't bark orders as sharply. He avoided certain areas of the ranch entirely, especially the northern stretch where the radios had distorted his voice. But the breaking point came 3 days later. The night was dead quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. The team was inside reviewing footage when one of the monitors flickered, a glitch that lasted only a second. But in that second, the screen showed something that shouldn't have been there. A silhouette standing directly behind Dragon on footage from the previous night. Tall, thin, featureless. And Dragon had never reported seeing anyone. Thomas froze the frame, zooming in, but the image degraded instantly, like something was actively corrupting it. When Dragon walked into the command center, the room went silent. He saw the frozen image on the screen and stiffened. For a moment, he didn't breathe. "That wasn't there," he muttered. Travis stepped forward. "Dragon, that figure was behind you. You mean to tell me you didn't see anything?" "No," he snapped, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. Then the radios hissed again. Everyone turned. A voice whispered through the static, broken, distant, impossible to place. At first it sounded like interference. Then, unmistakably, it formed a word. "Brian!" The team looked at Dragon, his real name. Only a handful of people ever called him that. The radio crackled again, the whisper stretching into a low, distorted imitation, repeating his name, almost mocking it. Dragon stood frozen, his jaw clenched tight, his knuckles white as he gripped the desk. "That's not interference," Travis said quietly. Dragon didn't answer. He just stared at the speaker, breathing through his teeth like he was holding back a wave of anger or panic. Then the whisper returned, clearer this time, and every hair on the back of Dragon's neck stood up. "Behind you." Dragon spun so fast that he knocked over a chair. Nothing was there. But the moment he turned, the entire command center's temperature dropped, the cameras flickered, and the same silhouette from the still frame appeared again, this time on a live feed, standing exactly where Dragon had just been. When he saw it, Dragon whispered something none of them had ever heard from him before. "I'm done." And for the first time on record, Dragon walked out of the command center without finishing a lockdown. Dragon didn't return to the command center for the rest of the night. He stayed outside alone, pacing along the dirt road that led toward the gate. Every few minutes he would stop, turn sharply, and stare into the tree line, as if expecting something to step out. The team watched him from the monitors, unsure whether to intervene or give him space. But the truth was already settling in. The ranch had crossed a line with him. By sunrise, Dragon was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, shoulders slumped, staring at the ground like a man replaying something in his head over and over again. When Travis approached, Dragon didn't look up. "It's not the ranch," he muttered. "It's me." Travis frowned. "What does that mean?" Dragon took a long breath. "This place, it doesn't follow you. It chooses you." He rubbed his face with both hands. "And something out there chose me a long time ago." It was the closest thing to a confession he'd ever given. He explained carefully that before the show ever aired, before Brandon ever bought the ranch, something appeared to him on the West Ridge during a nighttime patrol, a shimmering distortion that moved without sound, bending the air around it. He never filed a report, never told the scientists, never mentioned it on camera. "It watched me," he whispered, like it already knew everything about me. The team listened in stunned silence. This wasn't Dragon the security chief talking. This was Bryant Arnold, the man behind the persona, finally admitting what he'd hidden for years. "And now, it's back," he finished. "It's following me again." When the crew prepared for the next investigation, Dragon didn't suit up. He walked to Brandon's truck, dropped his security badge onto the hood, and said only one sentence: "If I stay here, it won't stop." He didn't wait for a response. He got into his own truck, turned the engine over, and drove toward the long dirt road leading off the property, the road he had guarded for years. The cameras caught one final shot of him in the rearview mirror, his face pale, eyes fixed on the mesa behind him. A week later, Brandon confirmed privately to the crew Dragon had officially stepped away. No contract dispute, no argument, no falling out with production. He left because something on the ranch wasn't just observing him anymore, it was calling him by name, and he refused to stay long enough to hear what it wanted next.